She sued for 75% of the company I built from dirt. In the bank meeting to divide assets, she smirked, until the bank's chairman walked in, looked right past her, and asked me, "Sir, are we ready to proceed with the transfer you authorized?" I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up 3 months. The first time I suspected something was wrong, Lauren was in the shower and her tablet lit up on the kitchen counter. I wasn't snooping. The notification just appeared there, bright and unavoidable, like a crack in a windshield you can't unsee. "Can't wait to see you tonight. He'll be at the site until 8. We have time." The message vanished after a few seconds. Some app that deleted itself, probably. But those words stayed burned into my brain like a brand. I stood there holding my coffee, staring at the blank screen, listening to the water run upstairs. My hand didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I just felt this strange, cold clarity settle over me, like the moment before you pour a foundation, and you know if you mess up the calculations, the whole building comes down later. I didn't confront her. Not then. Instead, I went to work. Keane Urban Works occupied the 3rd floor of a rehabbed brick mill on the Ashbury River. The building used to make textiles back when this city actually made things. Now it made overpriced loft apartments and artisanal coffee shops. My office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water. On clear days, you could see the skeleton of our newest project rising downtown. 23 stories of luxury condos that would sell for more than my parents made in their entire lives combined. I built this company from nothing. Literally nothing. 15 years ago, I was pouring concrete in the summer heat. My hands so raw they bled through my gloves. I mixed mortar. I carried rebar. I learned every single piece of construction from the ground up because I was too poor and too stubborn to do it any other way. Now we employed 87 people and cleared 8 figures annually. The thought sat in my head like a stone while I reviewed the morning's progress reports. My project manager, Tommy Reeves, knocked on the door frame around 9. "Got a minute?" he asked. Always. Tommy had been with me since year 2. He was built like a fire hydrant, short, solid, unbreakable. The kind of guy who showed up in a blizzard because the job wasn't going to finish itself. "Lauren wants to schedule a board meeting," he said, dropping into the chair across from my desk. "Next Thursday." "What for?" "Didn't say. Just said it was important we discuss strategic direction." He made air quotes with his fingers, his expression sour. I leaned back. "She say anything else?" "Patrick's going to present some kind of growth proposal." Tommy's lip curled slightly when he said the name. Patrick Hale. Strategic growth consultant. Hired 6 months ago because Lauren convinced the board we needed to modernize our brand presence and leverage digital integration. The kind of guy who said things like, "leverage digital integration," without irony. Mid-30s, expensive haircut, wore suits that probably cost more than Tommy's mortgage payment. He smiled too much. Talked about disruption and innovation like they were magic words that excused not knowing how to actually build anything. Lauren loved him. "He's brilliant," she'd said over dinner one night, her eyes bright. "Daniel, you should really listen to his ideas about the social media strategy. We're practically invisible online." I'd made some non-committal noise and gone back to my salmon. Now I looked at Tommy. "You think this is a problem?" "I think Patrick's a snake and your wife thinks he walks on water." He paused. "You want me to say that differently?" "No." He nodded. "Then yeah, it's a problem." After he left, I sat there looking at the city below. Factories closed, jobs vanished, neighborhoods emptied out. Then the developers came. They bought cheap, built expensive, and sold the city back to itself as something new. Something better. I'd been part of that transformation, proud of it even. But watching it now, the glass towers rising over the old brick warehouses like plants growing through concrete, I felt something else. This sense that everything beautiful eventually gets replaced by something colder. I pulled out my phone and opened the message thread with Lauren. What time will you be home tonight? I typed. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, late. Dinner with the Hendersons. Remember? I told you last week. I didn't remember, but that didn't mean she hadn't told me. My memory for social obligations was garbage. My memory for load calculations and building codes was perfect. Right. Have fun. You could come. Site inspection at 7. Of course. The eye roll was practically audible through the text. Well, don't work too late. I put the phone down. That night, I did work late, but not at a site. I sat in my truck outside the Henderson house for 2 hours. Their lights were on. Cars filled the driveway. I could see people moving past the windows, wine glasses in hand, the warm glow of a dinner party in full swing. Lauren's Mercedes wasn't there. I drove home alone, parked in our empty garage, and walked through our empty house. It was a nice house. 4 bedrooms, professionally decorated, the kind of place that appeared in local magazine spreads about successful couples. It felt like a museum. I poured myself a bourbon and sat in the dark living room, waiting. She came home at 11:47. I heard her heels on the hardwood, heard her keys hit the bowl by the door, heard her pause when she saw me sitting there. Jesus, Daniel, you scared me. She pressed a hand to her chest. Why are you sitting in the dark? Thinking. About what? Work. She sighed and kicked off her shoes. You're always thinking about work. How was dinner? Fine. Martha Henderson is insufferable as always. She spent the entire night bragging about her son getting into Yale. Lauren dropped her purse on the counter. I'm exhausted. I'm going to bed. I watched her climb the stairs, still wearing the black dress she'd put on this morning. It was new. I'd never seen it before. She looked beautiful in it, sophisticated, like someone from a different world than the one where I'd grown up eating government cheese and wearing my brother's hand-me-downs. She didn't kiss me goodnight. I sat there for another hour, drinking bourbon and watching the ice melt in my glass, thinking about foundations and what happens when they crack. As the story unfolds, hit the hype button, like, subscribe, and write in the comments, would you forgive them or walk away? The board meeting happened on a Thursday afternoon in our main conference room. 8 people around a table. Lauren sat across from me, wearing a cream-colored suit that probably cost $2,000. Patrick stood at the head with a presentation loaded on the flat screen. Thank you all for making time, he began, flashing that practiced smile. I know everyone's busy, so I'll keep this concise. He clicked through slides showing our company's digital footprint compared to competitors. We looked small, outdated. He used words like market share erosion and brand atrophy. The construction industry is changing, Patrick said. The companies that win aren't just the ones that build well. They're the ones that tell the best story, that connect with clients on an emotional level before the first brick is laid. I watched the board members nod. Jennifer Marsh, who owned a small stake and ran a marketing firm, David Osgood, an investor who'd backed us early, Robert Chen, our corporate attorney. They were eating this up. What's the proposal? I asked. Patrick smiled wider. I'm glad you asked, Daniel. We need structural changes. Right now, you're handling both operations and executive strategy. It's too much for one person. We're proposing a reorganization where you focus on what you do best, the building side, and we bring in dedicated leadership for growth, branding, and strategic direction. Meaning Lauren takes the role of executive chair with full authority over partnerships, branding, and client relations. I step into a formal CSO position with equity participation. He said it smoothly, like he was offering me a gift. You remain CEO, but freed up to focus on operations. The room went quiet. I looked at Lauren. She met my eyes without flinching, her expression composed, professional. This was your idea? I asked her. It's what's best for the company, she said. You're stretched too thin, Daniel. Everyone can see it. I see. I leaned back in my chair. Anyone else think I'm stretched too thin? Jennifer shifted uncomfortably. I think what Patrick's presenting has merit. Our online presence really is weak compared to— We have a 6-month backlog, I interrupted. Clients are literally waiting in line to work with us. Our reputation speaks for itself. Your reputation, Patrick corrected gently. But what happens when you retire? What happens if something happens to you? The company needs to be bigger than one person. He wasn't wrong. That's what made it so effective. David Osgood cleared his throat. I think we should consider this seriously. The market is changing. We can't ignore that. I'm not ignoring anything. I stood up. I'm just not convinced we need to restructure the entire leadership because our Instagram account is thin. Daniel. Lauren's voice had an edge now. Can we please have this conversation professionally? This is professional. Professional is me saying I'll think about it and we'll revisit next quarter. Is that professional enough? I walked out before anyone could answer. Tommy found me in my office 20 minutes later. That went well, he said. You were listening. Thin walls. He closed the door behind him. For what it's worth, that was bullshit. Which part? All of it. But especially the part where they act like you're the problem. He sat down heavily. Patrick's been making moves for months, building relationships with board members, taking them to lunch, sending them articles about digital transformation. He's been setting this up. And Lauren? Tommy's expression darkened. I don't know what your wife is doing, Daniel, but it's not helping you. That night, Lauren didn't come home until after midnight. I heard her car in the driveway, heard her footsteps, heard her pause outside the bedroom door. I pretended to be asleep. She slipped into bed beside me, the mattress shifting under her weight. In the darkness, she whispered, I'm sorry about today. I didn't answer. I'm just trying to help. You have to see that. Still nothing from me. She rolled over, her back to mine. Fine. Be like that. Within minutes, her breathing evened out into sleep. But I lay there awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about that text message from 3 weeks ago, thinking about the Henderson dinner she'd never attended, thinking about Patrick's confident smile and the way Lauren's eyes lit up when he spoke. Around 2 a.m., I got up and went to my study. I pulled up our shared cloud storage on my laptop, the account we used for household stuff, bills, receipts. I started scrolling through recent uploads. There. A hotel receipt from the Riverside Inn. 2 weeks ago. Thursday night. I clicked it open. 1 room. King bed. Charged to a credit card I didn't recognize. My hands were steady as I saved the file. The next day, I called a lawyer. Not Robert Chen, who sat on our board. Someone independent. Her name was Margaret Sawyer, and she came recommended by a contractor friend who'd been through an ugly divorce. Her office was downtown in one of the older buildings, the kind with marble floors and brass fixtures. Margaret was in her 50s, gray hair cut short, wearing a no-nonsense pantsuit. Tell me what's going on, she said after we'd settled in her office. I told her. The text message, the fake dinner, the hotel receipt, the board meeting. She listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she set down her pen. Do you want to save the marriage? I don't know. That's honest. She leaned back. Here's what I can tell you. Colorado is an equitable distribution state. That means marital property gets divided fairly, not necessarily equally. Your company complicates things. How? You started it during the marriage. That makes it marital property, at least partially. If she divorces you, she'll have a claim to a significant portion of its value. The words hit like a hammer. How significant? Depends on a lot of factors. Her contributions to the business, your respective incomes, how the court values your labor versus hers. But in a contested divorce, she could argue for 40, 50%, maybe more if she can show she contributed to the company's success. She sat on the board, attended events. That's it. Margaret's expression didn't change. A good lawyer will frame that as essential partnership work, supporting you, providing social capital, leveraging her networks. They'll make it sound critical. That's insane. That's divorce. She folded her hands. Look, I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to prepare you. If your wife is having an affair and planning to push you out of leadership, you need to start protecting yourself now. How? Document everything. Get proof of the affair if you can. Photos, messages, witnesses. Understand your company's structure inside and out. Talk to your accountant. Talk to a financial advisor. And for God's sake, don't do anything stupid like confronting her or the other man physically. I wasn't planning on it. Good, because I've seen clients lose everything because they couldn't keep their temper. She picked up her pen again. Do you know who the other person is? Patrick Hale, our strategic consultant. She wrote the name down. Is he married? No. That's something at least. No additional complications. She looked up. I'm going to be straight with you, Daniel. This is going to get ugly. If she's already moving to diminish your role in the company, if she's involving the board, then she's thinking ahead. She's building a case that the company can thrive without you. That makes her claim stronger. I felt something cold settle in my chest. So what do I do? You outthink her. You plan better. And you make sure when this goes to court, you're the one holding the high cards. Margaret tapped her pen against the legal pad. First step, I need you to hire a private investigator, someone who can document the affair thoroughly. That's leverage. Then we need to talk about your company's structure and whether there are any legal ways to protect your ownership stake. Like what? That's a conversation for next week after I've reviewed your corporate documents. She stood, extending her hand. Right now, just know this. You're not helpless, but you need to start fighting smart. I shook her hand and left. Walking back to my truck, I felt like I was standing in a building right before it collapsed. That moment when you can see the cracks spreading, hear the metal groaning, and you absolutely know, everything is about to come down. The difference was, this time I wasn't running. Whitmore didn't look at Lauren, didn't look at Patricia or Patrick or even the mediator. He walked directly to my side of the table and extended his hand. Mr. Keane, he said formally, are we ready to proceed with the transfer you authorized? The room went silent. Lauren's eyes widened. What transfer? Whitmore finally acknowledged her. The asset transfer finalized this morning, Mr. Keane's restructuring of Keane Urban Works, which was approved by the board and financed through Riverside Bank. Patricia Morrison stood up. Your Honor, we were not informed of any asset transfers. This is highly irregular. It's not irregular, Margaret said calmly. It's a standard corporate restructuring that's been in progress for months. All documentation was properly filed and approved through appropriate channels. Months? Lauren's voice rose. This started during the divorce. This is fraud. He's trying to hide assets. No, Mrs. Keane, Whitmore said, his voice measured. This restructuring began being discussed over a year ago. I have meeting notes and correspondence dating back 14 months. The divorce certainly accelerated the timeline, but the business justification remained sound. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. The new holding company, Keane Capital Holdings, now owns the real estate, equipment, and intellectual property previously held by Keane Urban Works. The operating company continues to exist and function, but its asset base has been refined. Patricia was flipping through papers frantically. How much is the operating company worth now? Margaret slid a document across the table. Approximately $4.2 million, after accounting for outstanding debts, current obligations, and operational overhead. That's impossible. The company was valued at $38 million last year. The company as a whole was valued at that. The operating entity, separated from its underlying assets, is worth considerably less. It's similar to valuing a rental business without counting the properties it rents. Lauren looked like she'd been slapped. "You can't do this." "It's already done," I said quietly. "Charles filed the final paperwork this morning." "Your Honor, this is clear fraud." Patricia's professional composure was cracking. "He deliberately devalued marital property to deprive my client of her rightful share." Judge Harrison looked at Whitmore. "Is this restructuring legally sound?" "Completely. Every step was documented, approved by the board, and executed with proper legal oversight. The business justification is solid. Asset protection, liability limitation, financing flexibility. This is standard corporate practice." "But the timing," Patricia started. "The timing is irrelevant if the action is legitimate," Margaret interrupted. "Corporate restructuring for sound business reasons isn't prohibited during divorce proceedings. If it was, every business owner going through a divorce would be prevented from making any operational decisions." The judge looked at the documents, looked at me, looked at Lauren. "I need to review this more carefully," he said. "Mrs. Morrison, you'll have opportunity to challenge the restructuring, but at face value, if the business justification is legitimate and properly documented—" "It's theft," Lauren said, her voice shaking. "He stole from me." "I protected what I built," I said. "There's a difference. You manipulated everything. The board, the bank, the timing. You knew exactly what you were doing." "Yes, I did." I looked at her directly for the first time that morning. "Just like you knew exactly what you were doing when you planned to push me out. When you convinced board members I was incompetent. When you and your boyfriend schemed to take my company." Patrick flinched at the word boyfriend. "That's not," Lauren started. "It is." Margaret pulled out another folder. "We have recordings of Mr. Hale discussing his plans to take over operational control. We have testimony from board members about Mrs. Keane's behind-the-scenes lobbying. We have evidence of coordination between Mrs. Keane and Mr. Hale to systematically undermine Mr. Keane's position." She laid out photos: the restaurant meetings, the hotel visits, the parking garage conversations. "This isn't a case of an innocent spouse being deprived of her share," Margaret continued. "This is a case of attempted corporate theft being thwarted through legitimate business action." Patricia was reading through the recording's transcript, her face getting darker. "Where did you get this?" "Mr. Hale contacted my client proposing a settlement. Mr. Keane recorded the conversation. Colorado is a one-party consent state. The recording is completely legal." Lauren turned to Patrick. "You tried to make a deal with him?" Patrick's face was pale. "I was trying to find a solution." "You were trying to save yourself," I said. "You knew the board was turning on you. You knew your position was collapsing, so you tried to negotiate, offering to testify against Lauren in exchange for keeping your job. That's not—" "It's exactly what you did. It's on the recording." I looked at Lauren. "You should listen to it. It's enlightening, hearing how quickly your partner was willing to sell you out." Lauren stood up, her chair scraping back. "I don't have to listen to this." "Actually, you do," Judge Harrison said. "Sit down, Mrs. Keane." She sat, but her hands were trembling. The judge reviewed more documents. The silence stretched out, broken only by pages turning. Finally, he looked up. "Based on the preliminary evidence, the restructuring appears legitimate. Mrs. Keane, you're entitled to contest it, but you'll need to prove fraud or improper intent. That's a high bar." "What about the affair?" Patricia asked. "The recordings show Mr. Hale and Mrs. Keane were involved in a relationship during the marriage. Doesn't that affect asset division?" "Colorado is a no-fault divorce state," Margaret said. "Marital misconduct generally doesn't impact property division unless it can be shown to have directly affected marital assets. In this case, the affair is relevant only to show that Mrs. Keane's claim of being a supportive spouse is undermined by her simultaneous attempt to take control of the company." Judge Harrison nodded. "I'm inclined to agree. Mrs. Morrison, what's your client's settlement position given these developments?" Patricia looked at Lauren. They whispered together urgently. I watched Lauren's face cycle through emotions: shock, rage, disbelief, and finally, something that might have been despair. My client, Patricia's voice was strained. My client maintains that the operating company is worth more than stated and that the restructuring was fraudulent. We request a full forensic accounting and a delay in any final settlement until— Denied, the judge said. The operating company's valuation is clear. Mrs. Keane is entitled to 40% of the operating company's value, which comes to approximately $1.7 million. That's actually quite generous given the circumstances. 40%? Lauren's voice was barely audible. I was supposed to get— You were supposed to get what you were entitled to, the judge said. Not what you wanted. Be grateful Mr. Keane is willing to settle at this amount given the evidence of your attempts to undermine his company. I helped build that company. You sat on a board, I said quietly. You went to parties. You smiled at clients. That's not building. That's decorating. She lunged across the table, not physically attacking me, just reaching, grabbing at the folders, knocking over a water glass. Patricia and Margaret both jumped up, pulling her back. Mrs. Keane, the judge barked, control yourself or I'll have security remove you. Lauren was breathing hard, mascara starting to run, her perfect composure shattered. You destroyed everything we had, everything we built together. No, I said, you destroyed it. I just made sure you couldn't steal the pieces. She crumpled back into her chair, Patricia's hand on her shoulder. Patrick hadn't moved through any of this. He just sat there, staring at the table, looking like he wanted to disappear. Mr. Hale, I said, you have nothing to say? He looked up, met my eyes for just a second before looking away. What do you want me to say? The truth would be interesting. How you seduced my wife to get access to my company. How you planned to push me out once the divorce was finalized. How you tried to sell her out when you realized it was falling apart. I didn't. You did. All of it. And now you've lost everything. Your job, your reputation, your partnership with Lauren. I leaned forward. Tell me, Patrick, was it worth it? Was trying to steal from me worth destroying your entire life? He didn't answer. Couldn't answer. I looked at Whitmore. Are we done here? He nodded. The transfer paperwork is ready for your signature. Once that's complete, Keane Capital Holdings will officially own all transferred assets. He slid documents across the table. I read through them carefully, Margaret checking each page. Everything was in order. Everything was legal. I signed. Lauren made a sound like a wounded animal. Mrs. Morrison, the judge said, do you wish to contest this settlement or accept the offered 40% of operating company value? Patricia looked at Lauren, whispered something. Lauren shook her head violently, but Patricia kept talking. Finally, Lauren whispered, accept it. Louder, please. I accept it. Her voice was broken. I accept the settlement. Very well. Papers will be drawn up for both parties to sign by end of week. This hearing is concluded. He gathered his papers and left. I stood up, looked at Lauren one last time. She was crying now, quiet tears running down her face, her perfect makeup ruined. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no triumph, just emptiness. You can have every broken piece I don't need anymore, I said quietly. Then I walked out, Margaret and Whitmore following. In the hallway, Margaret let out a breath. That was brutal, I suggested. I was going to say effective, but yes, brutal too. Whitmore shook my hand. Congratulations, Mr. Keane. You protected what you built. Thank you, Charles, for everything. It was my pleasure, and good business for the bank. He smiled slightly. Men like you, men who actually build things instead of just talking about building things, are worth protecting. He left. I stood in the hallway, looking out the window at the river below. The city reflected in the water, all glass and steel and ambition. Margaret touched my arm. You okay? I don't know. What you did in there, Daniel, you eviscerated them. Legally, ethically, emotionally. That was complete victory. Then why does it feel so empty? She didn't have an answer for that. I drove to the luxury tower site after leaving the bank. It was mid-afternoon, crews working, the sound of power tools and shouted instructions echoing through the concrete skeleton. Tommy found me on the 21st floor, standing at the edge where the glass would eventually go, looking out at the city. So? He asked. One. And I feel like shit. He stood next to me, both of us looking out at Ashbury Falls sprawling below. You know what your problem is? I'm sure you're going to tell me. You wanted justice. You got revenge. They're not the same thing. I thought about that. About Lauren crying, Patrick broken, the look on their faces when they realized they'd lost everything. Maybe, I said, but they tried to take what I built. They tried to destroy me. What was I supposed to do? Exactly what you did. I'm not saying you were wrong. I'm just saying winning doesn't always feel good. Deep thoughts from Tommy Reeves. I contain multitudes. He clapped me on the shoulder. Come on, let me buy you a beer. You look like you could use one. It's 2 p.m. So? We went to a dive bar near the site, the kind of place where construction workers went after shift. We ordered beers and sat in a booth, not talking much. My phone buzzed constantly. Texts from Margaret about paperwork, emails from board members congratulating me, messages from people I hadn't talked to in years who'd somehow heard about the divorce settlement. I ignored all of them. What now? Tommy asked. What do you mean? I mean, what do you do now? You've got your company. You've destroyed your enemies. What's next? I don't know. Build more buildings, I guess. That's it? That's the big plan? What else is there? He looked at me for a long moment. You're a hell of a builder, Daniel. Best I've ever worked with. But you gotta build something besides concrete and steel eventually. You gotta build a life. This is my life. No, this is your work. There's a difference. I didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Because he was right, and I didn't know what to do about it. We finished our beers in silence. That night, I went back to the house. My house now, legally. Lauren would take her settlement and go somewhere. I didn't know where. Didn't care. Tomorrow, I'd start removing all traces of her. Pack up her things, change the locks, make the space entirely mine. But tonight, I just sat in the dark living room, thinking about the look on Lauren's face when she realized she'd lost, the way Patrick had crumbled, the cold efficiency with which I'd destroyed them both. I'd protected what I built. But Tommy was right. I hadn't just wanted justice. I'd wanted them to hurt, wanted them to know what it felt like to lose everything, and I'd gotten exactly that. So why did I feel so empty? My phone rang. Margaret. Just confirming. You're comfortable with the settlement terms? Yeah. The paperwork will be ready by Friday. Once you both sign, it's done. You'll transfer the $1.7 million to her account. She'll sign away all claims to the company, and it's over. Good. Daniel. She hesitated. What you did today was impressive, legally brilliant, but it was also ruthless. I want you to understand that. I understand. Do you? Because I've seen clients win cases like this and then spend years regretting how they won, the methods they used, the damage they caused. She tried to steal from me. I know, and you had every right to protect yourself. I'm just saying, there's a cost to revenge. Make sure you can live with it. After she hung up, I poured a bourbon and went out onto the back deck. The night was cold, stars barely visible through the city's light pollution. I thought about the first time I'd poured concrete. I was 19, working for a contractor who paid cash under the table. My hands had blistered within hours, my back screamed. But at the end of the day, when I looked at the foundation we'd laid, I'd felt something pure. something real. That's what building meant to me, making something tangible, something that would last. But what had I built today? A legal structure to protect my assets, a trap to catch my enemies, a weapon to destroy two people who'd betrayed me. All of it justified, all of it necessary, none of it real. I finished my bourbon, went inside, climbed the stairs to the bedroom. Tomorrow, everything would be different. The divorce would be finalized. The company would be fully mine. I'd have everything I'd fought for, everything except the life I'd had before this all started. But maybe that life had been a lie anyway. Maybe Lauren and I had been pretending for years, going through motions, playing roles in a marriage neither of us actually wanted. Maybe destroying it was the honest thing to do. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting for sleep that wouldn't come. And I thought about the text message that started everything, the one I'd seen on Lauren's tablet all those months ago. Can't wait to see you tonight. He'll be at the site until 8. We have time. That's when it had all begun. That's when I'd started watching, gathering evidence, planning revenge. That's when I'd stopped being a builder and became something else, something colder, something victorious, something empty. The next morning, I went back to work, reviewed plans, checked progress reports, made decisions about concrete and steel and glass, building, because that's what I did, that's who I was. The divorce papers were signed on Friday. I transferred the money. Lauren signed away her claims. It was done. I didn't see her again after the bank meeting. Didn't need to. Patrick disappeared entirely. Heard through the grapevine he'd left the city. Good. Life went on. Keane Urban Works thrived. The luxury tower topped out 6 months later. We broke ground on 3 new projects. The board operated smoothly now. No more schemes, no more power plays. I worked 70-hour weeks, made more money than I knew what to do with, built buildings that would outlast me. And late at night, alone in the house that was finally just mine, I poured bourbon and wondered if winning was supposed to feel this hollow. But I'd protected what I built. And in the end, that's what mattered. That's what I told myself anyway. 6 months after the settlement, I was on a job site when I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Daniel Keane? A woman's voice, professional. Yeah? This is Rachel Morrison with the Business Journal. I'm writing a piece about successful local entrepreneurs, and I'd love to interview you about building Keane Urban Works from the ground up. I looked at the building rising around me. 23 stories of glass and steel, gleaming in the afternoon sun. I'm pretty busy, I said. It would only take an hour. We're featuring business leaders who've overcome significant challenges. Your divorce case made headlines, the way you protected your company while going through a difficult personal situation. A lot of entrepreneurs could learn from that. I don't know if there's much to learn. I think there is. How you fought for what you built. How you didn't let anyone take it from you. She paused. People respect that kind of determination. I thought about Lauren's face in the bank, Patrick's broken expression, the empty house I went home to every night. I'll think about it, I said. Great, I'll follow up next week. She hung up. Tommy walked over. Who was that? Reporter, wants to interview me about the company. You gonna do it? I don't know. You should. Let people know what you built here, how you built it. Yeah. Maybe. But I wouldn't do the interview, wouldn't talk about the divorce or the company or any of it, because talking about it meant thinking about it, and thinking about it meant remembering the cost. The workday ended, crews left, the sun set behind the buildings. I stood alone on the 23rd floor, looking out at the city I'd helped build, and I thought about foundations, how you pour them in darkness and cold. How they have to be perfect because everything else depends on them. How one crack, one weakness can bring down everything above. My foundation had cracked when I saw that text message. Everything that came after was just managing the collapse. But I'd managed it well. brutally, effectively, and I'd survived. That had to count for something, didn't it? I left the site, drove home through the darkening streets, parked in the garage, walked into the empty house, poured bourbon, sat in the dark, and I thought about the fact that this was victory, this emptiness, this silence, this cold satisfaction of having destroyed my enemies and protected what I built. This was what winning looked like. And tomorrow, I'd wake up and do it all again. Build more buildings, make more money, prove to everyone that Daniel Keane couldn't be beaten. But tonight, sitting alone in the dark with my bourbon and my memories and my victory, I wondered if maybe there was a difference between being unbeatable and being broken. And I wondered which one I actually was. The bourbon burned going down. The house stayed silent. And I sat there in the darkness, a man who'd won everything and lost something he couldn't quite name, building walls around the emptiness where his life used to be. Because that's what builders do. We build. Even when there's nothing left to protect, even when the foundation's already cracked, even when we're the only ones left standing in the ruins, we build. It's all we know how to do. 3 weeks later, the final paperwork came through. Keane Capital Holdings was officially transferred entirely to my name. Every asset, every property, every piece of equipment, everything. I signed the papers in Margaret's office. "Congratulations," she said. "It's completely yours now." "Thanks. What will you do now?" I thought about that. About the empty house, the silent evenings, the buildings rising across the city with my name on them. "Build," I said. "That's what I do." She nodded, but her expression suggested she understood what I wasn't saying. That I'd won the war, but lost something in the process. That revenge and justice aren't the same thing. That protecting what you built sometimes means destroying everything else. But I didn't say any of that. Just shook her hand, thanked her for her work, and left. That afternoon, I stood in front of the bank where it had all culminated. Where I'd watched Lauren realize she'd lost. Where I'd signed the papers that protected everything I'd built. And I thought about that moment, her tears, Patrick's broken expression, the cold satisfaction I'd felt. I'd protected what I built. But what had I built, really? A company? Yes. A reputation? Definitely. A life? That was less clear. I walked away from the bank, got in my truck, and drove to the luxury tower site. 23 stories of glass and steel, nearly complete now. In 2 months, people would be living here, making homes, building lives. I climbed to the top floor and stood where someone's living room would be, looking out at the city through the empty frame where windows would go. This is what I built. Concrete and steel and glass, structures that would outlast me, and that had to be enough, because it was all I had left. I pulled out my phone, looked at it for a long moment, then I opened the message thread with Lauren, the one I hadn't touched since before the bank meeting. I typed, "I hope the settlement gives you what you need. I hope you find whatever you were looking for." I stared at the message for a full minute. Then I deleted it without sending, because what was the point? It was over. All of it. I'd won, and that was supposed to be enough. I put my phone away and looked out at the city as the sun set behind the buildings, casting long shadows across everything I'd built. Victory tasted like bourbon and ashes, but it was victory nonetheless. And tomorrow I'd build something else, because that's what I did. That's all I knew how to do. Build, even in the ruins, especially in the ruins. The sun disappeared behind the skyline. Darkness fell across the city, and I stood alone on the 23rd floor of a building I'd created from nothing, master of an empire I'd protected at any cost, victorious and empty, and utterly, completely alone. But I'd kept what was mine, and in the end, that's what mattered. That's what I told myself as I climbed down 23 flights of temporary stairs in the gathering darkness. That's what I told myself as I drove home to an empty house. That's what I told myself as I poured another bourbon and sat in silence. I'd protected what I built. I'd won. And if winning felt like this cold, hollow victory, then maybe that was just the price of refusing to lose. I could live with that. I had to live with that. Because there was nothing else left. Just me, my company, my buildings, and the ruins of everything I'd destroyed to keep them. The bourbon burned. The house stayed silent. And I sat in the darkness, a man who'd won the war and lost the peace, triumphant and broken, and somehow both at once. But I'd protected what I built, and in the end, for better or worse, that's what mattered. That's all that mattered. That's all that was left. The ice melted in my glass. The city lights glittered beyond the windows. And Daniel Keane, builder of empires and destroyer of enemies, sat alone in his victory, wondering if there was any difference between winning and surviving, wondering if he'd ever know, wondering if it mattered. The glass was empty. The house was silent. And somewhere in the darkness, a foundation cracked a little more. But the building still stood. And that was enough. It had to be enough. Because it was all there was. I poured another bourbon, raised it in a silent toast to no one, and drank to victory, empty, cold, triumphant victory. The only kind I knew, the only kind I had, the only kind left.